Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Out of the Game. I'm Sean Elliott. I'm playing host today. I'm sick because Jeff Green is out. He's stuck in the airport. And I'm joined with the fabulous Bobito Ashley
Hello.
and the spectacular Ngai Kroll.
Hola.
And today we're going to talk to you about video games.
Oh, I love video games.
No, well, let's first start. We want to talk about games. We've all been playing a ton of different games. And then finally, both Robert and I got around to watching District 9. So I think it's fair to come back to that. And now we don't have to worry about spoilers. I'd hope so. I guess it's still in the theater. There's going to be someone who is listening who hasn't seen it. So we're going to have to, I don't know, we're going to have to give a spoiler warning on that because there's no need to talk
the
about
next
it.
episode. If you're the guy who actually saw District 9 after we saw it, like, sorry, just skip this one.
Exactly. So, yeah, I'll let you kick it off, Robert. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know what you expected out of the movie. I'd had like friends rave about it to me for weeks, and so I went into it expecting to hate it because usually when people rave
Exactly.
at me for a long time, I get this annoying like backlash, frame of mind going into it. And I'm not a huge sci-fi guy. That's the other thing. I sort of grew up force-fed sci-fi by my mother, and I sort of have hated sci-fi ever since then. But I really, got into the movie not because of the horrible parody of The Office and like fake mockumentary shit that started it.
yeah.
but like once the shit actually got started and there was actually an interesting story to it. I don't know if you want to give any background on like what the movie's about. I guess most people have probably
Yeah.
seen it.
So the basic setup is that an alien vessel appears over Johannesburg, South Africa, and it sits there in the sky for some time before first contact is made. Basically, doesn't do anything. It's just inert. Humans eventually go up and I'm not going to summarize the entire movie, but we go up inside, find out that all the creatures inside of it seem terribly sick, weak, and we basically pull them out of the ship and basically set up a concentration camp for them, or it's not a concentration camp at first, set up living space for them that's very slum-like. The one of the first positive things I'll say about the movie is that I've been, how over the years you just get so used to looking at CG effects that they stop meaning anything. I mean, at least for me, when you look at the screen, you're like, okay, that's real, that's CG, there's the screen back there. And that, I wasn't here when you guys talked about the Star Wars trilogy, episode 1 through 3. But I just felt entirely detached from them for that reason. It was like, okay, here's just a bunch of spectacle. And the wise thing here in grounding the alien technology and the alien creatures in all too real slums, corrugated tin houses, cardboard shacks, and lean-tos and stuff like that, it allowed it to take on some kind of, of course it has to be, bottom line, it has to be quality effects. But did you feel the same thing, either of you guys, where you're looking at it and you're like, I think I'm appreciating this more because I'm buying it?
I felt that way about the effects in general because I felt like they held back on super flashy stuff, probably out of like budgetary necessity, and they used some puppets and some like real stuff along with it. But yeah, I think like because they couldn't go all fucking crazy Transformers with it, also it made the thing feel more real. But definitely, that it was in the slums and that they were trying to create this really gritty atmosphere. I think definitely helped.
So here's just to get into like the reading thing. I think you have a movie set in Johannesburg, and it has aliens that appear it's basically an apartheid system. It's impossible for anyone, and I think it would be foolish for anyone to watch it and not at least try to figure out, okay, well, what's going on here? What sort of ratings can this movie sustain? And it was really troublesome for me at first because I was like, all right, I think I got this pinned. There's this notion that, you have this obviously highly advanced species that's come from, who knows where. They're obviously able to travel through deep space and end up here. But you change their context, you put them in the slum situation instead of, whatever culture that they were living in before. And they're reduced to just total misery, right? I mean, they're able to be subjugated. People look on them as well, obviously it's not that they're just less than human because they aren't human, but they don't look upon them as like a life form that's worth, much of anything. And you're like, okay, this just seems pretty straightforward. And then it starts getting fucking weird because you've got, I mean, and impossible to sustain that kind of reading because there's, of course, the alien who, unlike all the other ones who suddenly have lost the will to fight, who decided that, okay, we'll sell our super technology weapons for cat food. And even though we can apparently jump 15 to 20 feet, we're not going to leave this shithole that we're in. Some of that, though, could be the cultural thing, right? Like when the alien gets out inside into the larger Johannesburg, what's it going to do? It's still going to be, an outcast. But there's the one guy who is still in touch with his culture, his technology, and alone is like, I'm going to get us out of here. And the thing there is that, like, well, that just throws the whole context thing out the window. Well, let me ask.
Well, because they have that totally the sort of subplot of this weird culture of the aliens that they had, like a command, sort of like a command class of people who were in charge of stuff, but that the people who were left were left, and the people that they found in the ship were kind of like the worker drones.
Okay,
and they didn't.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. I totally missed that somehow. Maybe just because I was so disgusted in many parts by which in a good way, which is pretty hard to do. Yeah, he was arguing that it was like instead of a cultural caste system, it's basically an anatomical, physiological caste system there, like you would have in insects or something, and that the guy who's still able, he's an upper class who's still able to work the technology and stuff, was the one who dropped down in the pod that came out later.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely got that. I mean, I can see your frustration with trying to like come up with like a metaphorical framework for the movie because I feel like it's not really made for that. It strikes me as a movie
like
that's...
I should say, I'm not. I mean, trying to find one of many, right? I mean, why I said a reading rather than the interpretation of the movie is that, like, just looking and seeing what suggestive possibilities are there.
Yeah, it's just that movie struck me as like one of these modern movies like the last Batman, where they don't really go. They use all of these references, like in this one, there are references to apartheid and to all of this, third world misery and civil war and warlords and all this like corruption and fucked up stuff that happens in the world. But I felt like it wasn't really commenting on it. I felt like they just took it for the flavor, like they took it for the authenticity of it and wanted you to connect to it and make it feel more real, but not to actually say anything about it. And I think that, they're afraid to say things about the world.
But this is the whole, I don't want to get back into the Resident Evil thing, but like this is the whole, can you take and responsibly say, I'm going to set this movie that's about, it's basically about alien human apartheid and set it in South Africa, the side of, human apartheid, and say it's not going to... It's just there for flavor, right? I mean, it's still going to be suggestive,
No, you can't. Definitely not.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's a horrible move, but I mean I couldn't help feeling like, after sitting through the whole movie that was really the idea behind it, because they seemed to constantly undercut any sort of political like clarity in the movie, and it just turned into like a buddy movie,
Even the whole, the whole nature. What's the nature of what's the acronym they call the military force? It seemed like it was like a PMC or something. It was a private corporation that was.
It was like some sort of like mix between the UN and Halliburton.
Right.
I couldn't quite figure it out.
And Guy, you've been silent. You want to chime in?
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that I read in terms of interpretations for people who are more familiar with recent South African politics is people were saying that the metaphor that was being explored there was not actually apartheid, that it was South Africa's own struggle to deal with an influx of refugees from Zimbabwe, as opposed to sort of apartheid itself. Now, the challenge there is that for those of us who are less familiar with it, that's not the first reading that's going to come to mind. And then, if I'm not mistaken, there were also reports, I think maybe it was the BBC or other places, out of Nigeria where albinos were being...
they're consumed for witch doctors.
Magical qualities.
Right, which sort of plays into, the part of the movie that came in for the most criticism was its portrayal of the Nigerian, warlord type figures in the slums who are basically, they're the ones who are selling the cat food to the aliens, which sort of functions as appears to have almost some sort of narcotic properties to them, as well as it's the food they like to eat. And my beef with the portrayal of the Nigerians was just that it seemed like there was something fairly generic about the portrayal. That it just didn't have a precision to it that really individuated them. It was basically just sort of, here are these guys, and they kind of want to eat these prawns, and prawns being the pejorative term that's used for the aliens, and then consume them. And then the last thing that I sort of felt was that it's sort of interesting, in this day and age, that you would make the human character the main character. It kind of feels like a lot of those movies that you would see in the late 80s about, whether it was Mississippi Burning, where, two white FBI agents are the heroes, or, Cry Freedom, where it's about Steve Biko, but it's not really about Steve Biko. It's about the character that Kevin Kline plays and his family and that kind of stuff. And you're sort of saying, it's like, well, wouldn't the more challenging thing to have done would have been to have made the aliens sort of the protagonists?
Right.
Those are some of the things that came to mind for me.
Everything when you're describing the handling, the treatment of the Nigerians, it sounds about par for the course for this movie, because everything is done in such broad strokes and sometimes so poorly. There's no real detail when you look at anything. So even the main character, at first I didn't even realize that he was going to be the protagonist or even a villain, or I didn't understand how prominent a role he could play, because as soon as they had the scene where he's harping at who's to become his nemesis in the military contractor for carrying too much ammunition, I was like, there's no way they were going to portray, create such a caricature out of a character that they want us to understand and to feel for and to put any depth to. And it was a classic case of okay, they show him, we need to make people despise this guy so that we can flip it. And then when they show him, he's just sort of reveling when they're burning down the pods where infant prawns are housed, and just talking about how glorious the popping sound that it makes is, and then all of a sudden it's 10 minutes later.
That was disgusting, man. I gotta say, there's a lot of stuff in that movie that made me cringe.
It was definitely trying over and over again, and it's such fertile territory too. I had avoided conversations about it, and so I was surprised that it had the whole twist from the Fly movie in it, and that's really, there's so much potential for just to really disturb and unsettle someone there.
I have to say that even if, you kind of thought well, maybe there's going to be some sort of alien transference, I didn't expect when they cut the cast off his hand that he was transforming into an alien. That was definitely a shock moment. But I think
the very first thing I thought when I saw that was oh, now he gets to use the fancy alien guns.
Right, of course.
Yes, yeah, definitely, definitely. But the thing that comes to mind, I think, based on what you were just saying, Sean, I think it goes back to something that Robert said right at the outset, is that tonally, the movie started out really strangely, because they clearly wanted to go for this sort of documentary type feel. The aesthetic is very much, evokes that kind of feeling, but they took it in, as Robert said, this office-like direction. So it was sort of this strange comedic kind of thing. It took a while to sort of figure out, well, how seriously am I supposed to take what I was watching? Right. And I wonder if that was to sort of moderate kind of the extremes that they were going to go to in that first part. Like you said, when he talks about setting the alien eggs on fire and hearing them pop. But I thought if they had just played it a little more straight, rather than sort of this weird sort of in between serio comedy kind of thing, that that might have worked better.
From the beginning, though, would you? I'm just in its defense, devil's advocate. I wondered though if we would have reacted, if they would have got the revulsion from us that they did, if from the very beginning we were on our guard. We weren't like, oh, okay, this is just going to be ridiculous. At parts this is like The Office or something. And that, in a way, might have got me to let my guard down. And then when it started getting like legitimately disgusting.
I mean that may be the case, but I just really disliked not for the strange like tonal shift that it created, but I just really disliked the opening documentary section of the movie. I just felt like it was so much really fake feeling exposition to like get you caught up, It reminded me of a video game, like I'm reading the story in the front of the instruction booklet or something, and they're telling me all the backstory that I need to know. I just felt like it was really clumsy.
It was almost.
So
like
you mean specifically the talking head stuff, or do you mean like the?
Yeah, I mean definitely like the news, but also the way that the main character would conveniently tell you the facts that you needed to know about the aliens as he was documenting his day, getting ready to go out and do this operation that the movie sort of centers on. And it's just sort of like conveniently telling you all the things you need to know about aliens.
It was almost like I wondered at some point if this was a short film that the director had put together in order to pitch studios and people like Peter Jackson with, to give him the funding to make the rest of the movie for it.
Well, it was originally a short film. I mean, there's a short film version. I think it's called Alive in Joburg or Alive in Johannesburg.
Right.
Which is it's available on YouTube, and
which is totally different.
So he'd explored some of these themes in previous shorts. But I mean, the funny thing though was that despite the fact that I had some very similar issues to Robert with the start of the movie, I thought the actor, regardless of whether it was the more comedic stuff and the more serious stuff, I thought he was terrific. I thought the lead actor did, he played it really played it really well. But just sort of the overall feel of it was pretty strange. And I also sort of felt like it was a little too compressed. Like, I think like the entire movie takes place over 72 hours maybe. And in terms of real time, obviously I think the movie's like maybe an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, it went by pretty quickly. And I kind of felt like you needed sort of some more, just a little bit more downtime with him sort of absorbing what was going on. I mean, just the pace of it was just so pell-mell that I just kind of felt like I wanted him to sort of process it definitely made it more.
It definitely made it harder to stomach when he was suddenly like best buds and I'll die with you, or I'll die for you with his alien friend. I was like, oh really? Wow, that came out of nowhere. I mean, for me, the sort of cliche. This is definitely a spoiler if you haven't seen the movie, but the sort of cliche, ending where he's like, go on without me, that sort of shit. That was, for me, like the movie was a bell curve, and the middle was just fucking awesome. And closer you get to the beginning or the ending, the less that I enjoyed it. But I mean, I don't mean to be like a nitpicker or a complainer. I really thought it was a really excellent movie, and I thought it was kind of amazing how much I was able to, after they set up the aliens as being kind of disgusting and dumb, how much I was able to get into the main alien like buddy character. Like they dressed him differently and they gave him all of these like eyeball expressions, and he had this sort of cool demeanor.
Well, and this kid, the kid too, was so easy to to feel for.
Yeah, the kid was E.T.
Yes.
It was like luckily, like they're much cuter when they're young, apparently. so, but yeah, I was really digging the that character and their relationship and stuff.
The fact that they were able to flip that switch on people so quickly too is like to put you. I mean, it's kind of like getting you to the audience position to double that of the main characters, where you're like, okay, yeah, these things are hideous, they're frightening. I mean, you look at it and you see them in the slum, you're like, holy shit, I wouldn't walk in there for anything,
Yeah.
And you don't, and I noticed it's like, it was gross when they were popping. I'm like, okay, God, that's a bit much. But, when they were killed or injured in the beginning, it was like, I didn't really feel anything. I mean, but then by the time, and I don't say that as like some kind of sociopath or just because like I'm biased against species that don't exist or that we fabricate for science fiction films, but just because there wasn't enough there. But then by the end, you were totally like, ready, not literally, but, so to speak, ready to pump your fist when the aliens decapitated the shithead from the PMC. So they did that feeling. It's interesting is that like, even though like, God, let me say again, I'm sick and I feel so fucking inarticulate and my head's so cloudy. But despite the fact that the transition was so hard for me to buy in the protagonist character, it's like the fact that my emotions made the jump with them is testament to them succeeding on some other line. One thing let's place our bets though I'm assuming this is going to become a trilogy, and as soon as, just in the exact same way that you're like, okay, you saw a tentacle come out of the cast, you knew that he was going to be shooting alien weaponry. As soon as he started transforming, well, not as soon as he started transforming, but as soon as he befriended the guy, I was like, okay, this is a trilogy, and in the end, he's going to have to decide at that point whether or not he wants to become human again, or whether or not he's going to, stay a prawn and fall in love with some other prawn thing or something like that.
Probably.
Well, it sort of implies more that like the guy went for help, and the next thing is like they're gonna come back to Earth, and I guess this time it'll be personal. What did you guys think of the sequence where he was in the test facility and he was being forced to fire the weapons and to use them on other aliens?
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
That was definitely instrumental in making me sympathize with that guy. Like, it was like, oh, he does have limits. Like, he'll blow up a shed full of aliens, but he doesn't actually want to, like, shoot one, which is weird. But, I guess you see that kind of conflicted personality in real life all the time. But, yeah, that was really hard to watch. That was rough.
Yeah, it had the thing that's interesting is that he so that Neil Blomkamp was originally supposed to direct the Halo movie, with Peter Jackson producing, just like Peter Jackson produced District 9, and he directed the Halo shorts, and I actually had never liked the Halo shorts because I never felt that they looked that much like Halo. It had a very similar style to District 9 in terms of, very desaturated in terms of the color palette, and very, sort of very, worn and weathered. And looking at that and then looking at the trailer for Avatar, I kept feeling like, which I think I said when we were talking about the Avatar trailers, that this guy would have been much better suited to direct Gears of War and have James Cameron direct Halo. Because I feel like the color palette in Avatar with the purples and the greens and whatnot is much more close.
That's because Avatar is Halo guys playing World of Warcraft. Like, that is the movie. It's like the movie is Halo guys play World of Warcraft.
It's Halo Wars.
Halo Wars, yes.
Yeah.
I would have been interested to see what happened with the Halo movie as far as depicting the alien stuff, like inside the Halos themselves. Because like I always, when Halo came out, the way that they would make their levels would be to obviously focus on the combat space first and foremost above anything. And you make these combat playgrounds with a bunch of BSP, which is like raw geometry as opposed to static meshes, which might be like, here's a specific like a stone fountain or a cornice, and assembling those pieces like Legos to make structures. so they always had that, and that ended up the utilitarian nature of their design process ended up creating the aesthetic, and that would be just a lot of rectilinear shapes and concrete and different color things. It'd be interesting if we had Luke here. I know you can't really talk about it, but I always wondered if they felt after making the original that way that they had to be consistent, and that in the sequel that their world would still have to look the same way, even though they might not have had the same technical restrictions that they did that necessitated that simplicity in the beginning. But if someone made a Halo movie and they gave some other, they fleshed out more what the Halos look like and what, all the other alien spaces look like, then that could translate back into future games. Or if they're just, pretty much the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, I would find it really hard to imagine a Halo movie that would be as no pun intended Spartan and like empty as Halo is. Halo is really minimal. Like their whole design is just like big open spaces. The alien stuff is like very streamlined.
Or paintball
flat.
courses,
Yeah.
Like in the same way, like in the same way, like if you go and looked at a map of a paintball course for a combat space, and it's the perfect place for the combat to have paintball, but you can't pretend it's something else.
Like,
you can't say this is an infirmary just by sticking a sign on the wall that says infirmary or whatever.
Yeah, but just the look of the game, it's just so simple. So I can imagine, I forget the director's name, looking at that and thinking that he needed to create some new atmosphere for it or something.
Right.
But I got to say, back to the movie, that I enjoyed, even though it was a super low budget, movie. I enjoyed the action in that way more than I've enjoyed the action in like big budget modern action movies like Transformers and all that stuff.
I haven't seen it.
They had all this like ridiculous over the top horror B-movie stuff where you'd see like people's heads explode, and it's not very real, but it's really effective for me and really like whoa, when you're watching a movie and you're sent back to your like teenage years by watching someone get decapitated.
I'm surprised. You say this is they had a low budget. It seemed like it was a big budget.
Yeah, it's a really low budget movie. Like they
said $30 million. That's what but even if you double that, that's by movie standards these days, that's ridiculously inexpensive. You compare it to, who knows what they spent on, say, 2012. I don't know if you guys have probably seen the trailer, but I don't know if you guys saw the alternate version of the trailer where someone took out all of the effect stuff and it's just the performances.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's ridiculous, but it drives home what kind of acting actors are doing when they sign up for this stuff, and B, like how ridiculous like the effects are, and the effects in 2012 are astonishing. Like there are a lot of times like where you'd be looking at stuff in the movie and you're like, that looks fake, and like this stuff, the destruction that's being done looks insanely plausible, except for the fact that what it's in the service of is John Cusack and his family, his extended family, escaping from the Loma Prieta to end all Loma Prieta earthquakes in a limousine. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that's why when I Twittered it, I said, Tex Avery's 2012. Like it looked plausible, but what it was in service of was entirely cartoonish.
Right.
You couldn't take it seriously.
It feels just like the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios.
Yeah,
it's exactly like that.
Or the earthquake ride that they have there. They had like the big one ride at Universal Studios, and it's all. It's like Dragon's Lair, essentially. The game Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
It's just like one series of missed catastrophe after another, and by the end of the thing, you're like, the two are almost apart. The actors have nothing to do with the, like at Universal Studios. It's funny. You're like, a freeway splits in half, but of course it's just like the crack in it looks like the way that you would carve a fucking pumpkin. It's just like this big sawtooth thing, and then like it splits over, and you're constantly avoiding shit falling on your head or something along those lines. But yeah, I don't know. I think Dragon's Lair is like, every the bridge breaks behind you, the barrel lands behind. I mean, the boulder lands behind you over and over again, and instead of taking those moments out of Indiana Jones and making them last for however long it took to play Dragon's Lair in its entirety.
Well, and that's what District 9 definitely did much better than 2012, is that it was grounded. Like, the scale of it was so much more human that you felt his pain when he was going through just like the stuff that was happening with his hand. You felt it when he was being forced to shoot these aliens. You felt it when he was shooting his way out, and all those things. I mean, it wasn't like, let's just throw 10 million of something at you, and because of that, it just sort of resonates more strongly.
It makes me wonder if people could use some limits. Like maybe it would be helpful if the people trying to make these big, affecting action movies didn't have all the money in the world to try to wow you, and had to come up with, the most interesting way they could do it instead of the most over the top way.
Well, you definitely get that feeling watching the 2012 trailer. I just couldn't help but think of like, wow, that's a lot of our fellow nerds at their computers, doing a lot of code to make this stuff look like this, and you're just like, in service of what? And I may have said this on the podcast before, but one of my really good friends back home says, the mark of a great director is when they've got an unlimited budget and they still make a good movie. It's like premised on that idea that, the more money you have at your disposal, the more resources you can throw at it, you can do anything, so you do everything. And there's a certain weightlessness that you start to have. So you look at the first Matrix movie, which I believe was shot for $70 million, and you compare it to the sequels, which I think were done for like something like $150 million each. And like the Burly Brawl, for instance, right? The whole thing, like where Keanu Reeves, where Neo takes on an ever multiplying army of Agent Smiths, and that sequence is spectacular. And I get the larger point of what they were trying to do. Like, I felt like the Wachowskis tried really hard not to cheat by where they had left off at the end of the first one. So then in the first one, he goes from being Clark Kent to Superman, right? And so you're sort of like, well, what's going to affect him? And it's like, well, two things. It's rather than like just one big thing, it's like a lot of little things. And then also the people around him that he cares about, they're still vulnerable. Just like, Lois Lane or Perry White, or those guys are still vulnerable. But when you look at that sequence, at a certain point, it almost becomes like a musical. It's almost like Fred Astaire. And I think they deliberately sort of play into that. Like, I don't think they're unaware of what it is they're doing, but you don't care about what's happening in that moment as much as you did when it was just Neo and Agent Smith in the subway.
Right. I got the same sense from Kill Bill 2, where I much preferred Kill Bill 2. Instead of having the whatever, the 88 or what are they called?
The Crazy 88s.
Yeah, like they're a big giant circle jerk, as opposed to, say, just a fight between two individuals inside of a fucking single wide trailer, or with Uma trying to get out of a coffin, or all the scenes in the chapel where you just have a few people, and what Tarantino does best, and you have the build up between them and all the electricity, and then that erupts.
And you can have them
violence.
Talking. Like, that's the thing.
Exactly.
When you go to a Quentin Tarantino movie, you don't want to spend 20 minutes watching people not talking. You want them to talk.
There's also a kind of cleverness that I appreciate too. Like, even in my favorite action sequence in the first Kill Bill was when she was attempting to get out of the hospital. And it's like, okay, you have someone in very specific situation. How do you work out? What are the possibilities here? Whereas, there are only very, very few possibilities, and you have to really like think to find them, what you can do to make this scene work. Whereas if it's just, you have 100 people fighting and they could do whatever the fuck you want, and it's like
Well, yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I'm just thinking now, you're talking about the Crazy 88 scene, and that's being done with like swords, as opposed to, there's a certain weightlessness to combat in the Matrix, and certainly in the Burly Brawl. But if you remember, there's a sort of an up-tempo version of Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood that's playing under that black and white fight scene with the Crazy 88s. And so that also sort of has this very propulsive, almost musical, like, again, like Busby Berkeley quality to it. And I guess like maybe to a certain extent, when you're creating an action scene on that scale, it kind of has to devolve into something approaching a musical, because when there's that much going on, I mean, you realize that it's implausible. You know, there's no way in real life that Uma Thurman is gonna, you know, or someone with, you know, the bride's skills, is gonna kill all of those people. At some point, they're going down. You know, and
Do you guys feel the same way about games? Like, do you enjoy games with more like one-on-one encounters as opposed to like giant mobs?
It depends. I wouldn't say that, because I mean they're just so different. Like the difference between a Soul Calibur match and, I don't know, mowing a ton of zombies down in Resident Evil. But I mean, like, to get my response out of the way, I think some of what I was saying about in praise of Resident Evil 5 applies, where the more you can make me pay attention to each individual, and even if that interaction is quick, it takes all of 3 seconds, that I'm actually focusing on it, as opposed to, like, say when you're typically in a turret sequence in another shooter and you're just spraying left and right and you're just mowing tons of dudes down. Or even if they're the guys that are popping up and down behind crates, you know, in, like, you know, a Medal of Honor or a Call of Duty, I don't get the same effect as I do when I'm able to watch them long enough, let them live long enough to observe their behavior, or just to see exactly how I dealt with them.
And for them to be differentiated in some way, like to be like, okay, there are like 5 or 6 different kinds of guys, and this guy behaves in this way, and I have to, you know, deal with him in a certain way. I mean, I always
Right.
find that more interesting than like, oh, Nazis are popping up out of every corner, and I've got to shoot them all.
Or even if they're types of Nazis, like, you know, when people play Left 4 Dead and they scream out the names of the boss infected as they see them, or, you know, when people play Halo, they're very, very tuned into the type of enemy. If that's a jackal, if that's a grunt or a brute, and that ends up giving them, even though it's making them unique as a type, it's still better than, like, what you're saying, where it's just there's nothing, there's just dudes, you know.
You've been studying up on your Halo, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had to. I think anyone that's making shooters, you know, has to pay attention to them. And
Because you're suddenly Mr. in the know about the Halo.
well,
I'm
I've
just I'm
played
just pointing that out.
all the games up to ODST. I still haven't got to play yet. And my issue is, I think, you know, it still pretty much stands. I think combat wise, there's an enormous amount about that series and that they've basically offered very instructive lessons for everyone that's making a shooter, any kind of shooter. It doesn't matter what. There's something good there. But my biggest problem was the art side. It's just, like I said, it's so utilitarian that I like to feel like I'm immersed in some place. I mean, part of the fun for me in playing a video game is feeling like I'm going somewhere that I've never been. And that's why it's disappointing for me to always see every game where the assets are nothing but shipping crates. You know, like, here's a maze made out of shipping containers, or here's some more of the concrete and the aluminum textures that you're seeing over and over in every game. And I know why you do those, you know, especially now that I've, you know, I'm learning to make levels and stuff. I mean, they're the perfect Lego pieces. You can assemble any size, shape, map out of those units as you want. But if you go the extra mile
Yeah.
and say, let's turn this into something that looks, you know, this creates a mise en scène here, and, like, make people feel as though they're in a place. I've always liked that. I'm not just saying that because, you know, now I work at the team that made BioShock, but I mean, I always appreciated that, and that was why um, I think I liked so
You've
many
got
games I
to
did.
you've got to play you've got to play Uncharted too.
I'm looking forward to. Let's go right into
Must.
oh yeah, actually we're not gonna. I was say let's use that to talk about games we've been playing, but I think we're agreeing to hold
Yeah,
off.
we'll hold off on Uncharted. Yeah.
Do you want to give us
Well, I
just
think we
enough
can.
of a taste to tell us, like, how? I mean, 'cause
Sorry. I think Guy was trying to say something real quick.
No, I was gonna echo exactly what Sean was saying. Is like, you know, yeah, we should hold off on Uncharted, but give us a little taste of like why you're, because you know, you seem to have responded really, really strongly to it.
Yeah, well, you know, I've been playing lots of games lately, and for one, it's just amazing to play a game that is just so insanely well crafted. I mean, even after playing a game like Batman, which is also a really well crafted game, like this stuff is just, you know, very, very thought out, extremely well paced, and the technology and the production are just like kind of mind-boggling. They're just trying to wow you constantly. But things like, just as a basic shooter, which I played the original Uncharted, and I don't want to talk about this for a long time. I'll just give like a little taste of it. The original Uncharted was pretty cool, but had like a lot of problems as a shooter. And I would say that this game does a much better job of coming up with novel ways to use the mechanics that they have. Like we were just talking about, the way that people use crates and all of these standard objects to define the way that you will fight out your battles in a game or whatever. But like I was playing a level the other day in Uncharted where there are these signs that you climb around on on city blocks, where throughout a certain level you spend your time like climbing around this city, and you'll often end up climbing on these big like billboard signs, right? Well, there's a certain point in the game where suddenly you use the billboard signs as the place from where you like conduct this battle, and you have to hop around and take cover on different sides of a couple of different signs as the waves of guys come at you. And it's like a cool example of the way that they will come up with something really novel in the game, and they'll just throw it at you once. Like just once. They'll be like, here's a really cool thing that we're only going to do once, and we're never going to do it again.
Right.
And they'll just move on to the next like really interesting variety of stuff. It's just like I can't imagine the number of people or the amount of money or what had to go into a game like that, because it just seems like every moment they're throwing something new at you, and it's extremely well made.
The sign example you gave sounds like, I mean, you were saying they were having you interact with the sign in one way at first, right? I mean, you're using them to navigate the space. I mean, that sounds like a perfect example of being really wise and saying, well, we've incorporated this element, like what else can we get from it? What other interesting things can we do? And a lot of times, like games, I mean, there are stories of missed opportunities, right? I mean, that goes for every game, and it's, the people who make them are aware of that too. Sometimes it's time and money, but other times it's mainly just the time needing to move ahead and get the game out. But when you can tell that someone's like, let's take and examine every single thing we've got going in this, every single moving part, and see how they can recombine to create different, results.
Yeah, no, I think most things in Uncharted have a kind of double use that's really like fun to play with. But yeah, we shouldn't. I want to hear what you guys think about it, so we should hold off on that. I know that N-Guy at least has been playing Brutal Legend, which I played through this week. N-Guy, do you want to talk about that?
I hate to correct, but I actually have not been playing Brutal Legend. I was on the sidelines, and since I'm not in Berkeley like Jeff, I'm not going to be able to borrow your copy.
Yeah. So we've all been
yeah.
playing different games.
Yeah.
We have been. We have been playing different games, but I've been sort of playing a mix of stuff. I played. I had two opportunities to play DJ Hero this week. One was actually at a Best Buy. So this was the first time that I'd been able to play it. I got a demo at E3, but because I'm not an E3, I'm not a Game Critics Awards judge anymore. I don't get like I'm not like the Jeff Keighley's and Brian Crescentes of the world who get to demand to go hands on with stuff. So I was only able to watch it, and I thought it looked cool, but it also looked like I couldn't tell how hard it was going to be. I took an 8 or 10-week DJ class a few summers back, and I was proud to be able to pull off like maybe 2 decent mixes, and it was exhilarating and hard at the same time. And that was like real life DJing, so I was kind of like, well, how are they going to abstract this? So I played it got to play it once at a Best Buy in New York, and then Activision had a DJ Hero event, and I got to go through the tutorial and then play the game. And what's interesting about it is that the whole game is no fail mode. Like no matter what difficulty you're playing it on, it's no fail. And it sort of makes me wonder. Like, the fact that there is no option, even on the hardest difficulty, to turn it off, it sort of makes me wonder if, like, in the end, were they sort of not able to balance it at all?
Or is failing in a music game just an unnecessary frustration? I mean, I really don't think that like having to start a song over again is something that needs to happen in music games. And if you ask me, I think they could get rid of that in practically any music game, and I'd be fine with that. If you were going on, the hardest level and you were just trying to do well, I think the reward of doing well and getting the high score would be enough to propel you without having to have someone punish you for not doing well enough, you know?
Well, Robert, when you get tired of journalism, you've definitely got a career ahead of you at Red Octane, because that's exactly what they did. And I think that was the rationale, is that you do get the sounds of mistakes, and like tracks will drop out as you're not performing well, but you don't fail out. Like, it doesn't stop. You don't have to start over having gotten a third of the way through and completely fucked it up.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. And especially, you look at the music category has declined somewhat, or at least you're not seeing the growth that you once did. And, Guitar Hero is by far the most established of the franchises. After that, it's Rock Band. This is a game that's coming out. I think it's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be at retail, like $99 or maybe a little more. And, to establish something like this, which I think has the opportunity to bring in, people who are more into DJ music than are into rock music, I think it shows. Like, I ragged on these games for not having no fail modes for a really long time. Now it's interesting to see a developer go completely the other direction and say, hey, at the core of this is going to be no fail. You're going to derive your feeling of success and failure from how you make the song sound, as opposed to us telling you, game over, retry, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you already feel like a failure when you play a song bad enough,
Yeah.
You don't really need to have someone punish you for it. But how did you... I have not had a chance to play DJ Hero either. Like, how did you feel about the actual feel of playing it? I've always wondered, since really, like, the way that DJs play music, I mean, unless you're sitting around, like, constantly record scratching or just constantly matching new beats and stuff, it's not really like like playing guitar or something where you've got to do something rhythmic over and over again. And so I was wondering, like, what, how the gameplay reflects that, and whether or not you felt like it really made you feel like a DJ.
I felt like oddly in between. I guess it's like, in search of Schrodinger's cat, right? Like, the cat is either dead or not dead in the box, and you don't know till you open it. For me, it was like I felt like a DJ and not a DJ at the same time. I mean, you've got these buttons that sit on top of the record, which, I mean, obviously you just don't in real life. And the turntable felt a little bit heavier than it did when I was DJing in real life, and I wonder if that was because of, how you're pressing down on the buttons is very different from how your finger it's similar but different to how your fingers sit on a record when you're actually trying to scratch. So that's the most I could say about it. And I didn't. There's a part of it that you can do, which real DJs do, which is like where they'll sort of rewind the record back as opposed to scratching it back and forth in place. And in this game, when you pull off a rewind, the ideal thing to do is to pull off a rewind in a section where there's a lot of points to be had. So now you can get to replay that section, and get an even higher score. I feel like for most people who've never done any DJing, I mean, it'll feel good. I like the design of the hardware, and I feel like because it's more compact than just about everything from a Guitar Hero or Rock Band kit, other than the microphone. I feel like it can hang out on coffee tables in a way more easily than the rest of the equipment can from the other music games.
I'm looking at a picture of it right now. It looks pretty nice. Does the turntable actually rotate?
It does rotate. It does rotate.
So there's 3 buttons on the table. So the 3 buttons then can be in any position on that rotating turntable.
You mean like depressed or not depressed?
Well, there's like a green, red, and a blue button I'm looking at.
Right, and they correspond.
And right now that they're aligned, pointing to the left. And I was just wondering if those are rotating too, so that
I don't think the record like constantly rotates. I think the only time the record rotates is that you are rotating it, like you're doing like a scratch motion or something.
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly it. And the idea is that is the way the note tracks sort of spin out is that it's meant to be if you're right-handed, the buttons should be on the left, and if you're left-handed, the buttons should be on the right. That's the way it's intended to be. I think it's intended to be played.
It's
It
kind
see,
of
it seems it's sorry. I was just gonna say it seems like one of the from like the limited knowledge of DJing that I have, it seems like one of the joys of playing with a record is not just sitting there and like scratching or messing with it, but when you let go of it, like the joy of like you're gonna now like perform the magic trick of you've just fucked with the record, and now you're gonna let it go on exactly the right beat, and it's gonna start the drum beat right back up, and everyone's gonna think you're a badass. And it seems like the game can't really have that, like, since you don't really want to let go of the buttons, you don't want to like fling them away from you or whatever.
Well, the other thing too is that you're playing along with music in this, and like turntablism is a lot more like jazz in the sense that you're generating things as you go. I mean, there are routines, of course, that you'll see in like DMC tournaments, with like people juggling like double copies of something that made to turn one thing into the Imperial Death March from Empire Strikes Back or something. But a lot of it is just sort of improvising and creating things as you go. And I'm curious to see how this works when you're playing along with songs, because the songs aren't all that you're going to be playing along with. Of course, they're not made entirely using turntables. Turntables probably playing only like a really minor function. But maybe you can clarify, guy, because I don't even understand how the game works. Maybe you're playing more of a role of a DJ at a party where you're supposedly just playing the record, and you're doing something that approximates freestyling, and you're awarded points for that.
Well, the way this works is that the songs are actually all mashups, right? And I guess what you're really doing is sort of demixing and combining stuff. But it basically the song, like I said, it's a mashup of two songs, and it's already been mixed for you. And now what you're doing is sort of taking bits and pieces and putting one more prominently in the mix than the other. So you have a crossfader. And when you're actually DJing, the crossfader is what sort of shifts the balance of sound between record one and record two.
The controller has a single turntable, though, right?
Exactly. The controller has a single turntable, so it's almost like you've got your virtual second record. And you'll see note tracks like where sometimes the line. So like the picture that you're talking about, you've got a large button in the center, and then the two buttons on either side. The note tracks that correspond to the buttons on either side, you'll see sometimes like where it's going in a straight line and then it deviates out. Like the left button will go out left. The note track for it will go out left. And that's an indication that you're supposed to shift the crossfader
left,
in that direction, and that kind of stuff.
So yeah, that is nothing at all like actual turntablism, but it's not, and that doesn't mean anything. I don't mean anything by that other than that, just to state the obvious. Because playing a Guitar Hero guitar isn't anything like playing a real guitar, and it doesn't.
Yeah,
but
it is.
For some people, might have thought like, oh, okay, because of the nature of a record, that this was going to be much more lifelike. Well, Robert, here's what I mean, right? I mean, you're moving your fingers, right, and you're strumming to a pattern, but I mean.
It's like the most basic thing about guitar. Like the guitar controller like does get across the most basic thing about it, which is like forming a chord with your left hand and strumming with your right.
Right.
Yeah.
The most basic thing about DJing is on the one, right? It's like you do what you do on the one count. Dropping on the one, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 is like now obviously that doesn't mean everything is done on that, but that's like the first thing. That's one of the first things they teach you when you're learning to DJ. Is that dropping on the one. In this game, that's probably being done for you. right? And you have things like where you tap, where it's just sort of like hitting buttons in time with the buttons appearing on the note track. You have parts where you're supposed to scratch. Your parts where you're supposed to use the crossfader, and those are the things that combine. I mean, so it's fairly abstracted, but in its own way, not that much more than how Guitar Hero abstracts from playing guitar.
I think the more interesting. Sorry, I was just gonna say. I think the more interesting thing is, don't they allow you to sort of mash up different parts of songs and be a little more creative with it, or am I just imagining that I heard that?
No, because the songs are already mashed up, right? So within that mashup, there are sub mashups that are based on what you're being told to do. So you'll move part of a song more prominently into the mix based on what you're doing with the crossfader, but you're not improvising that. I mean, it's again, there's a note pattern. There are note patterns just like you have for the guitar in Guitar Hero, the drums in Rock Band. There's a note pattern.
Simon fucking says. It's like trying to rock a party when you can't work the crossfade, or trying to serve fucking spaghetti when you ain't got the sauce made.
Come on, Sean. Simon Says get the fuck up.
Simon fucking says, and I don't. Oh my god. Change the fucking subject.
It is brutal. It is brutal that that it looks a bit like a Simon Says because it's round. that's kind of.
It looks pretty neat. It looks stylish to me. I mean, to the point where like someone would come over, your mother would come over, and she wouldn't have any idea that it wasn't a device for creating music.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of I guess the one thing that's kind of a bit sad's not necessarily the right word, but because this is coming in so late into the current cycle of rhythm games, at a time like where it's getting more attention culturally, but like sales are starting to decline somewhat, is that I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to have large numbers of people who will own two turntables of this, right? They'll just have the one, and the more creative possibilities with something like this, I wonder if they'll ever really get explored. I wonder if they'll ever get a big enough audience to justify doing something that goes beyond just mashups. Something like where they could have something where you would take where effectively you would have a single record that was on your left and a single record on your right, and some effects and a crossfader, and make all that work together. I wonder if you'll ever have that.
I think at that point you just like get some real turntables.
I think there's a lot of kids though. I don't know. Like, think of all the kids that are going to want to get this. This is going to be the hot thing in like elementary schools and junior highs and stuff.
Elementary schools. I don't think Hannah Montana fans are gonna be getting DJ Hero.
No, but like when you think of the little kids, when you go to the front of like a Walmart and all the capsule machines, it's got like little homie stickers and like fake like bling and shit. Like that shit starts young.
I don't know if this is gonna have that authentic flavor of the little homies. I think this feels. I think that one of the problems with the game is that they're trying to reach like all of the audience that is into non-rock music, so dance music, hip hop, like different kinds of dance music. I mean, that's one of the things about like looking at the track list for that game. There's a bunch of stuff on there that I really like, and there's a bunch of stuff on there that I fucking hate. Yeah. And it's like kind of a problem, especially like the people I know who are into like, into serious dance music. They kind of have snobby tastes about it, and they very firmly draw the line on what they want to listen to. So I don't know, but maybe it is directed at kids.
That goes with rock. I don't know. I mean, what you said about firmly drawing the line and discriminating in taste, I think that goes with rock just as much.
Sure, it's the Guitar Hero problem too.
Yeah,
like, Guitar Hero has reckless.
Do you want to skip this?
Go ahead.
So do you want to skip this altogether while we're on the subject of music games, or do you want to briefly talk about IGN's music hubs?
Oh no, let's talk about this because you were really going after this
yeah.
On Twitter. I was like, wow,
So
So
originally,
so yeah, go ahead and say
uh,
it.
um, well, originally I found that there was like if you go to it's called musichub.ign, just the URL made it sound as though it was um just that, right? Where you go to check out music video games or something, or just like information about music in general, since I know they have comic hubs and stuff like that. And I was surprised to see that it was actually nothing but promotional material. Um, there was some confusion at first. One spokesperson talked to Andrew at One Last Continue and saying that this is a community site and how dare you insult the community of people who write about games. I mean, who come together and express their fandom in proactive ways by making community sites. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, Fireball, because for one, this isn't like just some shit that some fans whipped up together. I mean, every single thing on there was basically about the forthcoming releases of DJ Hero and Guitar Hero 5. There was nothing about here's the cool Guitar Hero 4 party we had, or here's some other nothing that would you would associate with community site. And then the writing even was as far as clarity and correctness goes, it was far superior to anything that IGN itself typically publishes. The content, though, was absolutely what you'd expect from vetted and polished PR pieces. So my concern only there was with branding. I thought that it was just okay. Change the name and say this. Say somewhere. The other thing, it wasn't clear
So
on
wait,
this site.
describe what it was exactly. Like describe the page for people who didn't see
Okay,
it.
yeah, I got the because I'm actually my conspiracy turn ended up turning to something far more sinister. So I was like trying to fast forward to that, but let me take a look at it right now, musichub.ign, and see what they still have. It's essentially just nothing but uh, Guitar Hero brand stuff everywhere. Guitar Hero. Oh, here it is. Here's a link to it. Let me just open this up in a tab. But it's just basically here's a story. Someone wrote a preview about one of these games. Take a look. Here's a mall tour schedule is on there right now. Previews at different sites. There were several stories that are about how the Kurt Cobain issue it isn't such an issue after all, that Activision has the rights and that Courtney Love is a crazy bitch. And there was just communities also, they tend to be a lot more heterogeneous, I think, than this. And so any of this aside, I was like, okay, it's clear to me that Activision paid to have this done. And they ended up coming out and admitting that later. They're like, yes, we were being compensated in order to run this hub for Activision. And all that. My only thing is like, okay, just rename the thing. Like Music Hub doesn't sound like it. And they said that, yeah, in the interview, that I suggest people go take a look at onelastcontinue.com. The guy from IGN was saying that this is the name that Activision wanted, so this is what we gave it. And I mean, they're just playing political. Everyone knew from the very beginning why you would call it that, and why it doesn't say. They now added, actually, to their credit, at the very top, it says an IGN community site for Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, and Band Hero. That wasn't up until I started raising the shitstorm. But the thing that ended up bothering me, I was like, that wasn't such a big deal. Then when I went to their official IGN, the URL is music.ign.com. I noticed that there's Guitar Hero and DJ Hero promotions everywhere, and that didn't seem like such a big deal. But then I started looking at the stories. If you go to this page and look, I mean, you guys should both do this now. If you look at featured promotions, it's for DJ Hero, it's the Music Hub, which we just discussed, a Hero Wiki, which is also hilarious because the entry for harmonics in there, basically they stopped existing the moment they stopped making Guitar Hero or contributing.
I was just looking at that, and they fixed that.
Oh, they did add. Okay. This is the thing, too. I took a ton of screenshots but the stuff I'm about to explain is the stuff that was really troubling to me. This stuff that I think is the suggestion is flat out unethical and just dirty and would make me personally want nothing to do with the site whatsoever. And that's that under their articles now on Music IGN, which is not a community site. This is the Music Hub for the official IGN website. If you go through the stories, every single story, almost without fail, click it, and it turns out to really be about Guitar Hero or DJ Hero. And I would say for the past 5 days, ignore those because that's when I started pointing this out publicly. But if you go back before then, you'll notice anything. Just click one of the things, and it's ultimately about promoting these games. And then the other interesting thing is that the byline every time this is the case is IGN Music. And if you look on the rest of their site, they usually attribute a writer to everything. And this is the other funny thing too, is that as soon as I pointed this out, like I started seeing byline things. And actually, now I'm going to sound like a fucking crackpot. Let me point this out in really clear language. Every story that's got the byline of IGN Music reads exactly like it was provided by a PR person. And I say this as an editor, someone who'd been an editor for a long time. I'm used to looking at the type of copy that goes through. I'm used to looking at the quality of copy that's published online on websites like this. And it seemed curious to me that every time it was essentially a fluff piece promoting one of these games, it didn't have a byline. And other times, and the writing was noticeably poorer in quality, would have a byline, and it would seem
that makes it so much more sad.
Yeah,
it's like the authentic thing is like bad grammar and horrible writing, and the fake thing they've actually like hired someone who can write, and so it sticks out like a sore thumb.
So the fucked up thing now is just click up on the top. There's a latest updates tab, and if you click that, you can actually look at their past 3 months worth of content. And so I started looking around 999, which is when Beatles Rock Band came out, and I was surprised to see that there was nothing about the game at all, in the weeks preceding or following that. And in fact, the only thing about Beatles was something published the day before, and it was about the Beatles stereo box set review, and that was written with a byline and by Hillary Goldstein, and it doesn't mention the Beatles Rock Band. And the curious thing there is that if I'm an editor for a music site that's connected to a video game thing, I would say, what are people going to be Googling this week? What are they going to be talking about? What are they going to be looking for? What are they going to be posting on message boards where they're likely to leave a link to our story? We definitely want to cover. It's a no-brainer. You want to cover this, and you want to cover it in interesting ways where people are going to say, oh, this isn't just yet another review or just another story on this. And yet there's no reflection of that on this hub here. But furthermore, is like, if you're going to do a story, I'm trying to find an example. Okay, Coldplay, worst to best. You're like, oh, this is a feature on Coldplay. But the byline there is IGN Music, and it reminds you that, oh, their music is featured in the newly released Guitar Hero 5, so we thought it'd be a good time to take a look at their discography. So when you see this on literally dozens and dozens of stories that came out at the exact same time, the exact same week, and they somehow mention the forthcoming Guitar Hero 5, and their one and only fucking Beatles-related story doesn't mention the other thing, and that's the one with the byline. So I started talking to people privately about this, saying, hey, have I lost my fucking mind? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, totally, generally a skeptic about most things in my life. And they all agreed. They're like, yeah, this definitely seems fishy, especially when you go and look at the writing. You start to look at it really closely. And then when you go back to the last interview that was published on One Last Continue, look specifically at the omissions, which questions the interviewee declined to answer without saying he was declining to answer them, just basically duck them. And I'm still convinced, like I said, this is personally, I'm convinced that IGN is using their official music hub to run content provided by PR companies. So that would explain the omission in and of itself. They're basically letting Activision's PR write the majority of content for this site. And I think that
the thing that I don't get is, like, why don't they just go ahead and, would you have any objection if this page looked exactly the same as it looks right now, but above where it says Music Hub and IGN community site for Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, and Band Hero, if it just said Music Hub, an IGN community site for Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, and Band Hero advertisement, like, would you have a problem with it?
Like, don't
because
confuse again. No.
It's so obviously an advertisement.
No, but this this is where, okay, I need to figure out what I'm explaining that's not being clear about this, because this happened on Twitter, and I was like, fuck, I know Twitter is not the place to ever communicate something. You're talking about musichub.ign.com, right? Which is now marked an IGN community site. So I'm no longer talking about that. I'm talking about music.ign.com, which is their non-Guitar Hero site. This is, if you want to learn about anything to do with music and you're on IGN, this is where you go. This is not associated with it. See, this is the problem I had, and the confusion ended up working perfectly in their interest, because they were able to say, like, oh yeah, this was the problem, we fixed it. But that was the thing I found the first like day, and then when I looked is when I found the thing that was really troubling. So yeah, Music Hub is just like you said, just to make this super clear for anyone who hasn't followed this, is IGN's community site for Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, and Band Hero. The problem is the way that it was labeled. They didn't explain what it was at first. It seemed like official content. So that's fine. It's now marked, and you understand that it is not editorial content provided by IGN. But music.
Well, it's not really marked. It still kind of looks like it's official from
Right.
them. They haven't marked it as an advertisement.
I'm
which
just
they
willing to
should.
give it the pass because it's so pissant compared to what I'm pointing out now. And like sometimes just go there, go to music.ign and see for yourself that this is their site. This is where they cover their music stuff. And it now, does that make sense? Now do you see why that's far more troubling?
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
The equivalent is like if you go to New York Times and you're reading stories about the Beatles and the byline is New York Times Music, and that magazine and that paper has a tradition of sourcing its writers, and so that's inexplicably there, and what you're reading doesn't seem to match the editorial style of anything else in the thing, and it seems to totally be selling a product. But moreover, every other page in the paper for the past 2 months was doing that for the same product.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking pathetic is what I mean. I don't know what else to say about it, dude.
I just have to wonder like who it is that's reading this stuff even as I'm staring at this page. Like it just seems so arcane to come to IGN and read stories about like DJ Jazzy Jeff coming to DJ Hero.
Right.
Like, ooh,
Or
that's an interesting story.
who
I'd
would-
like to know about
Yeah,
that.
who would go
I love
for
the Fresh Prince of Bel
any
Air.
music news whatsoever? I mean, even if you were the dumpiest like kid who has like a fucking Jonas Brothers boogie board, you wouldn't go to IGN Music to learn about music. You know, you presumably be going
No.
to someplace that better services your needs. You know, like the massage.
So I guess
parlor.
that we might have now figured out why it is that they have to be funded by the Activision music games because no one's fucking reading it.
I want to hear N guy go and argue because with the story that's called Jay-Z Worst to Best, we rank the prolific MC's body of work. And this is also about DJ Hero. But yeah, they got a nice breakdown.
Wow. Yeah, and I guess the thing is too is that on music.ign. So if you're on music.ign and you click on which of these Renegades, it's the one that has the photo of Jay-Z and Eminem.
Uh-huh.
So Renegade Tracks revealed. So you click on that, and then it takes you. You'll see, like right over the headline, it says Music Hub presents.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I mean, it would seem to me like if I were doing something like this, I wouldn't actually cross-link stuff.
And
You know
it's
what I'm
totally
saying?
cross-linked.
I mean, like it just. It's one of those things like it definitely because like now you can't tell, like you look at that and it almost looks like a banner.
It does, and it's like I don't even understand. Music Hub presents Guitar Hero 5, but that was the other funny thing. Incidentally, when at first the guy was like, "Oh yeah, you know, this is a community site, and you're shitting on on all the people and communities out there," and like meanwhile, like right click on that button and look at the properties. It's fucking ads.ign/advertiser/Activision. I was like, oh yeah, like and trying what a bitch maneuver, dude. He tried to paint it as though like, oh yeah, look, you know, if you're out there and you made a Big Daddy
like, there's a
costume for
huge
Halloween, you know, fuck you, we don't like that, you know. So it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with like my concern is that there was no real community generated content on that site because communities don't just sit there and do that. They do far more fucking creative and worthwhile things.
Yeah. I love the idea that there's a community around this shit at IGN.
Community's it's the new like populism. Like the other thing though, like I do encourage we can let it. People can come to their own conclusions, but I mean when you're clicking around there, especially from the past few months, and skip back a week from today when I suspect some of the changes reflected the stink that a couple of us were making. Even look at if it's like, hey, like a highlight of a music video and you're like, hey, this ostensibly doesn't have anything to do with Guitar Hero. Click it and hit the fucking play button. And the first question is always like, so yeah, do you play Guitar Hero? It's amazing. I mean, I'm serious. That's how bad it really is, dude. Uh, but anyhow,
You just went straight
Well,
60 minutes right there, Sean.
I wish it hadn't happened when I'm so fucking out of it and like doped up on cough medicine and sick. But oh well, so be
Have
it.
you been sipping on some scissor
Sir,
roll?
exactly. I was gonna say the same thing.
Everything to Sean right now sounds like Guitar Hero.
Uh,
Oh
All
man,
right. Well,
wow.
I got to pick my dude up at the airport pretty
Yeah.
soon, so we might need to.
when Jeff
All right,
comes
well,
bring
back,
this to a
then-
close.
I know we'll bring it to a close now. And I know we'll be able to talk. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about Uncharted.
And some Brutal
Dean-
Legend. I'd like to talk
Brutal
about Brutal
Legend.
Legend next time around.
And guys been playing
Absolutely.
Demon's
I'd be
Souls.
interested. I'd be interested, Sean, in what you think, since you are since you are an RTS guy, and this is a very like unconventional RTS. I'd be interested in what
Brutal
you
Legends is
thought about it. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
mean to try that. I've been playing, and somehow we all ended up playing different games. I've been playing Operation Flashpoint, Dragon Rising, and Risen's a PC RPG by the makers of the Gothic series. And hopefully, there's a chance that Jeff will have played Risen. I'm not sure. But
And I'm planning on playing Borderlands this coming week.
yeah, I think we'll all be playing that. So yeah, there'll be a ton of stuff to talk about. And everyone listening, we gotta let Robert go, but we're also in debates about whether the podcast will go weekly or not. We'll keep you posted. And until then, we are saying bye bye. Bye bye.
Sayonara.
Bar.